I realized that I met you. I was
Find a builder. The moment we check the car, it's obvious. Sure. Yeah.
All right, so we're going to start over here, everyone. On gather. That's fine.
Everybody in? So I'm Ryan Melvin. This is the first of my sections project. So we started by looking at the structural grid. And we started by looking at how to insert multiple geometries into the system. And then we looked to inspiration from three different geometrical systems that they find referring to this as a city. And we began to find strategies for combining those things into one system that maintains difference, but also has a position. And then to build up to the feature, the first assignment, and we began to sort of merge them together. So they took their four independent original projects and then found how to find a common language, how to way to fit those things together from their Cambridge project. And then on top of that, we started to look at different graphic systems, so how different graphic systems can foreground existing homes within the network system and how to create other reasons the project. So this particular group drawings are there. So I encourage you to look at what's completed in the presentation and then the drawings you fill in or the QR code. Leave it to the students to complete the project. So you guys can pause up there.
I think the principle is very unique side. It shows different.
Okay, but let's not report. Direct us where we should go.
It shows different kind of lines, how they connect to each other, like the linear line. That's how it can connect with the vertical line, and how it can be created some interesting forms for the whole shape, because our four containers have complex line to make like a final installation. So we try to figure out how can we create a like system of lines to create a new installation for. And also, I think this is how our geometry come out, and we want to create a secondary system to have some like interesting graphics. When people come around the installation, we can find like have different view to the installation, and we can get different kind of graphics. It's like when you can see the animation I made from the QR code. When you rotate around the installation, you can see like the line split out and the line combined together. So in this kind of feeling of the whole installation, when it can be 3 dimensions, it can also be 2 dimensions lithography. So I think this is our main concept for our installation. From the beginning, like we use the picture, we use the line, actually we abstract the line from the picture, and we create our container from two dimensions to 3 dimensions, and we simplify from 3 dimensions to 2 dimensions. I think it's a kind of exploration of lines.
And has that been universal to all projects? Going from 3D to 2D
Yeah.
to 3D? Okay, so that's the method. Okay.
From simple things.
And you all agreed on the size of your line. I noticed that they're all the same size.
Yeah,
The cross section.
it's like for the physical model, it's like 3 inches per line. Yeah, and for the small container, it's 1/2 inches. This whole model is 1/2 inch line combined together.
So when did you decide to start painting white and black? And how do you think that complicated either 2-dimensional or 3-dimensional views?
Actually, I think the whole model is like white. But some pieces is black. It will be outstanding. And when you like look at the black line, you can find some, just like some misreading. You can see like a picture or graphic thing. It will create like a certain feeling, not. I think it's the kind of.
But the intention, because you can see it in the axiometric, the intention of the black and white also figures kinds of spatial projections in, down, around.
Yeah.
So it very much highlights the spatial complexity when you paint it black and white. It's an interesting project because I keep trying to find rules and trying to find like rules of assembly, rules of how to connect what to what, rules for how one transformation does the next transformation. But then I sort of check myself and I think, it's actually very cool and very beautiful. Could it be better with rules? Do rules and logic make it better or worse? It depends on what you're trying to do.
Yeah.
Yes, but I would suggest that the black and white, I hope you get to finish your big model because you should see that with the real material, you don't get the abstraction of the black and white. So I think you should push and finish it so you can photograph it.
Okay.
Yes.
The sort of theme that you're playing is you have 4 containers, right? So there were 4 containers. And you all worked with the same sort of parameter of this 3-dimensional line. And you were working with a frame system. So you originally started with some sort of regular, typical frame. But when you brought them together, the question that comes to mind is, what kind of agreement did you make? So that's what kind of is what she's raising. I think is that from the top view, it seems like you agreed to juxtapose the 4 pieces around this pivot. So there was a kind of agreement there at that moment that you would decide that the thing that binds the 3 together is some kind of shared pivot. And then you use radial polar geometry, radial geometry, so you get a rotation.
Yeah.
And then you get certain big, as you said, the white for you was a kind of established color. That was for you the field, and the black is used as figure to enhance certain pieces. But at a certain point, when you look at it, at least from that drawing, you don't really know whether the black was the original color. because you get such a communal effect. Not sure, which is okay, that's part of the quality of it. And then the shadows are very fascinating, because that's a literal projection of two-dimensional form into a two-dimensional surface. And I don't know if you thought about that much, or that was just something you saw in this drawing. The things that could be interesting is the kinds of discussions, one piece, when you juxtapose them, how do they change the meaning? And that would have been interesting for you to tell us, like when you put them together, was there like an aha moment when you began to see possible readings of another order, not just the order of four, but the order of one, or the agreement, as I call it. So that would have been interesting for you to tell us.
Actually, when we took the four models together, we find some interesting moments, like for example, my curve will compare to her curve, so it is very interesting. So maybe we want to continue the line from our four models and find some possibly figure out some simple lines which connect the whole four models together. So
Can you explain a little bit on that? Just wanted to ask. I mean, there's clearly a process, and I can't even go back to it. It's a conversation that Annette was bringing up in regards to rules. Why would you want to have rules? But I'm actually more interested or more intrigued in the fact that you're saying that you have four things that have been combined together. More importantly, you call one yours, you call another yours. How do you differentiate which curves are whose? Like, I cannot tell, right? Clearly, you guys can't tell. So what is the defining characteristic that was trying to combine all for conversation?
So because our container is based on like based line container. So it's like the starting point is like making continuous line to make it really dimensional. And then we will put them together because we use the same elements, which is angular and like linear, something like that. And it's like magic time, like you can see starting one point and using like endless to find the path to go. So we want to like maintain this characteristics. Then we were like, if things are not connected together, we want to make it connect. So that's why we review how like adjust to make things look together.
Interesting. You didn't really answer my question, but it's what you say. Nevertheless, the question about continuity starts to suggest that there is a particular idea of how things, let's say, coalesce into I think, even if it's, I don't know actually, quite frankly, you guys have really told me if I'm supposed to be looking at this thing and seeing one thing or seeing a dialogue between multiple things, that they are exchanging information. But more importantly, I guess the point of continuity, right? How do you address the point of continuity? Discontinuity is tectonic elements and its reading in regards to black and white in terms of painting, or the disassociation. So like when does black intensify the continuity as reading? When does black stop? And point at a particular moment in your exam when it doesn't.
actually, I think for our whole country, we have some common points, like we have the object in the center and we explode to the bounding box. So this is our, like the key things, like the common point for our total four things. And also like this one and this one, we like just projection to the bounding box or explode to the bounding box. But this one and this one, they like use some continuous line to touch the bounding box. So these have like some differences, like also some common points for our four models. So this is our like how can we figure out our four things? So
Yeah, I get it. And what's interesting is you said that your basic strategy for each of the individuals, you got an object which you projected.
Yeah.
You exploded it towards a periphery. So why didn't you, what made you not use that strategy when you joined In other words, why didn't you suggest that the boundary or the theme of exploding towards a boundary guide you in terms of putting the three together? Because what you've done is you actually reinstated, there's a new object now, which is this column. Yeah. But incentive could have been, if you explode, the center gets empty. So therefore, what would have been in the middle would have been nothing. So you would have taken the force of, peripheral explosion. I'm just saying you had a theme. You could have pushed that into the way you joined the three, four together. Does this have anything to do with that model there?
Exactly.
Yeah, that's what I want to know.
Does it?
Can we
Or
go
is that
over
in
here
the
again?
complete model?
Okay.
Or is it?
I'm going to go back to my first question, because when I looked at the smaller model, it looked like it was a unit. Something like that, I could probably get as an inch. But when I started to take a look at the way the bar maybe the number, or maybe it's pulled back and it's almost one and then you add the line to it. And this is something that we should get to. This is something that has been struggling for a long time. How you make the line. So that's the big piece of over time. I think if there's a discipline to impose on this, I think we'll answer a lot of the questions that how to give it a spark of being individual percent going to you.
This is kind of interesting also because I'm just thinking about it. And I think, you learn that when you jump up radically in scale, you have to figure out a way to build it. It's just by nature of the thing, it has to have rules that have different stories. Different here, the same here, different here, the same here. And that gives you, just on its own, a set of rules. It sounds like a really old person. But I look at this, and I know it. I look at this and I think, wow, what's really beautiful are these kinds of marks, which are almost like a notational system, helping things to grow and expand.
Plug and play.
It's a plug and play, right? And I think, oh, well, at this point, this begins to have its own network. And perhaps we don't paint it black and white, because it's now something else. It's grown into something else. Because you're trying to replicate what you did in drawing, and sometimes it just doesn't work. Sometimes you just let it go and become something new because you realize something excellent in construction.
Sorry, did I ever, I just wanted to know your consent. Did you ever address this marking or are they part of the project or?
What kind of system of what else could be made? Opportunities to use the not to fix things. You know, grow in any number of different ways. Yeah.
This model, this one introduces the idea and because of the construction message, this like, although once you explore this, you can see there were quite a few. This method of construction doesn't require that gives you a certain language. Curve that becomes something that reaches from that. Also, how do you introduce the angle? So it's that in the joint.
So this is our solution for from the one to the three. For this small model, try to explore the line, different type of line, how to combine this together, how to make it more logical or more reasonable. So this is kind of like some part of our of the
I think the small model is super successful. I really love it. Especially because it addresses the key points of the floor that one of the graphic fall. And how do you achieve that with continuous strength? Cross sections, but on the other side, what is the relation to the structural fall? Finally, actually goes to work with bearings, with that order, to reach that marker with the part. And the marker is so fat that the white space and the black space are at a similar scale. So the question of the figure, what the space of figure is on. These are stories in the front of the play. You have the open space and the fixed space being at the exact same level. Right? And then sometimes it starts to become, can be a wall behind this. And then the third category is what within that section. So, section drawing in the wall, you have black shade signifying everything needs that structure. But next to it, black identifies the graphic.
Yeah, I was going to ask about the graphic, and we talked about this option, it's not, but the choice of black and white and how you apply the black and white. I read on the text online that you were looking at the ground as well, right, that you wanted to combine kind of projection of color, which is black and white, with space. Looking, I know that you were talking about it, but that's everybody up there over the drawings. I think the decision about what that graphic is, what we actually project onto this, would be a big considerable way in terms of whether you want to use that graphic or to allow the piece to be complex. I mean, maybe that was your intent, but what I mean by that is it would be a lot easier to, for instance, project just a square or an image of graphic or feature, which everybody very recognize, and try and let that simple graphic be applied to this very complex surface. And you'd be able to recognize that if you do to a certain point solve the combination of a very simple graphic with a complex surface and build, I think, when you do a complex graphic on top of a complex surface, it's hard to have that moment where everything's again, I think for the project, the other thing I would say about that is with projection, and I know this maybe is was not encouraged or not maybe part of the investigation with the studio, but thinking about the ground, I forget who mentioned it, talking about the shadows. Yeah, the shadows and the rendering, and seeing that as an opportunity to further the investigation onto the 2D surface, but using the ground, as part of the project as well, it would have helped also with that kind of projection graphic, whether it be a simple graphic or a complex graphic. So, like, if you had a base, even in this model, and then allowed the projection of the black onto the white model to continue that base, and that would further help kind of cue in that moment and then the simple figure involves together. Does that make sense? So again, maybe off base because it may be that you weren't looking for unifying with the graphic. You wanted to explode and make further complexity out of it. So maybe that was not the intent, but be very clear, I guess, with what your intent was, the graphic and the block.
Saying that coming from Islamic background here, I would substitute at least in my vocabulary, like if the word complex separate from the word complicated,
I think that the main difference there is, in fact, internal consistency. Of course, internal consistency doesn't necessarily rely on rules, but it relies on very particular type of rules. Meaning that ultimately the rules that are coming back to this first point, the rules are not an end use of itself. The rules are there to establish all sorts of how to have a dialogue with the fact. So I would say all of the moves that we described earlier are complicated in the sense that there's a superimposition to things that don't actually have any information exchange. They're just being imposed versus a complex behavior. It's one that actually has the dialogue or interaction. The information has been exchanged in the system. Could be any dimension. And I guess I'll give you just, I don't want to take too much of your time, but one of the things that I love about Node.js is the detail of that basic fact. In front of us, these are finished, and beyond the metaphysics of the unfinished, which we can find thousands of contemporary utopian visions of what does it mean to be unfinished, both as a stance, as aesthetic, as political statement, or something that is constantly being built. I'll give you the only this example that I can remember of, right? Like the entrance to the Acropolis was never finished because of the provision war. And still to the day, the technical aspect of bringing a stone up that hill is part of the image for the parchments. So when you look at something like that, you think about the construction process as a process itself, with the process of construction is an aesthetic, then what is fun? Right? And you think of it as kind of longer time scale, one can even incorporate the acts of constructing the particular interest.
That is that at the moment, but if you practice it in a different way, and you're discovering that these I think and the kind of reinforcement is not by another certain piece to also develop absolutely. That's it, exactly. So I too. But I know that the really takes time, and as we were working through it, we were learning it. I think the best way to work don't try to make this look like that. Let this now discover the new set of rules about material scale. We are talking about scale. Complication over here. And the kind of intensity of that. So that I need to make the contribution.
We get very practical. Training drive.
One drawing that helped use your mind. Great. Yeah, like don't play. People like how much proximity to each other.
I think that is still another question. Whether there is a possibility of I think it was a great project. About it being a team project. Everything. I was just wondering what would happen if consider the spaces that you're creating at very different scale, but at a singular scale or it's together. But as further, I think we can actually models perhaps this is able
But I think,
We're
you know, the one, I understand completely the parameters. Right now. And all of it also refers back to outlining also by as we go to the next. I want even love the part of the exercise, the context, is the I love it.
And how the.
No, really off, I think, you know, I think Daniel and the rest of the group should pick up on that. Sometimes getting everything done the way you think it is, isn't the flexibility. Sometimes you learn more by making this just. And it's really about absorbing those things and figuring out what we learn from that. And I think that's part of the unseen opportunities. They're not nice, they're just I think that's a good question. I've been in the same spot in my career, like I built things that did it on more than I could do. Quickly the question is how do I cross? But no matter what you learn from the process, we made something of value. Good job.
I think we're gonna move over here.
All right, again, we're doing this live streaming thing, so I'm sure you can know. I also forgot to mention that there is QR codes for each of the civilians here on the Hyperlapse. And this will go directly to the website. This time around, these are also a small part of a larger design. So we have these in a program called Sketchfab, and it's kind of an AR program, so you can see the larger design that they did. So check that out. The students can also probably show you it in Sketchfab as well. With this section or my studios this semester, they primarily dealt with carbon fiber. This is pre-preg carbon fiber as a primary component. It has to be baked in order to be cured at like 400 degrees. And in the beginning, I think all of our studios for the theater project, we started to dabble a little bit with it. And more specifically, we were kind of looking at this notion of fading out. Our details kind of fade between two different types of materials. And, you know, my section also was really looking at solid heaviness because as we move into the chamber project, carbon fiber is that opposite, right? So it feels kind of really interesting boundary condition of solid void. And I'll let this team introduce the rest of it. Maybe if you guys want to say something yourself.
So our project is called carbon foliage. Our members, my name is Chloe.
My name is Neil. My name is Joe.
So our project focuses on carbon fiber, but also as a community, also something more natural for moss. And the idea is that carbon fiber tends to be more like an industrial material versus like moss more natural material. So like the two coming together and integrating together sort of shows the connection and also the separation between these materials.
And about the design language of experience that we got, you can pull out this project, this how we transfer between physical to digital models back and forth. to make more adjustments, calculations to make this all possible. So we actually started with using the place to make this curves. It kind of looks scratch halfway in the first glance, but actually started with hand carving with clays. And from using this clays, first thought was like thinking about how we would try and slice as like natural things in the world, like versus gravity or let's say changes. You can see, and we photoscan these and transfer it to a visual model. So you see that, and then we also like create it perfectly. And you can make the traces just by hand or things like this. And a lot of efforts there. And at the end, we use the language form that we got from these plays and from other temperatures and transfer it and try to show it through the use of void just requirements. Want to create a surface that can have be kind of also folding a little bit. And at the end, like also going back to how like carbon fiber is synthetic material. Yeah. And we also want to make it kind of neat or married with the part of like the nature as well. So like the spaces between the carbon fibers becomes like ground like condition for the mosses to attach to it and go along with it.
Yeah, I'm gonna talk about the fabrication process. So because we are mainly using carbon fiber as our main material, so due to the land using characteristic of the carbon fiber, so before it bakes, it's very soft, like a spring. So it's able to help us to create this continuous curvature. So and then we first build this metal framework, and then use this one as the whole structure, and then we're using the carbon fiber to weave this surface. So and after bake, but because like the size restriction of the oven, so we have to break our whole project into smaller pieces. So that's why it looks like each of them are in a small box. And then after we bake, and then we assemble it together to create this continuous curvature. So I think the challenge part of the whole design is because we want to use the carbon fiber to create something very light, but also at the same time it's very hard. So from visually carbon fiber help to create this visual lightness. But at the same time, if you can try to touch the material, it's very hard. So it's kind of like and it's also very another challenge is super time consuming to create the
No, it'll take plenty of attention. It's more.
One of the challenges was like we need to have some sort of attention while reading.
yeah.
Yeah, I was that structured. But one of the problems was like originally we were using software skills for the outer contours. But as we were like applying attention, it was kind of like deforming the whole like form contours. So we use stronger. With this skilled structure, we can like hold the carbon fiber into tension, and then when it in tension, we bake it. So you can just yeah. So here is so after bake, we will retain the tension that we have.
Decrease stressing.
Yeah, and then also for the base, because when we finish this, so now like it's kind of we are planning to use a base to create some kind of like infinity to more extent beyond just the carbon fiber, but also like there create some kind of that, and also because carbon fiber there's also some interesting curvature underneath, so we kind of want to use this reflective surface to also help the audience to see the curvature of some of the detail that we had under.
Also, reference to the dinosaur application. So,
Let's say I have those questions at the time, great. This is stunning. I think you have a clue. Probably all readable. I know that in the world of but this notion you've got of intersecting, finding material working together, start to things with this thing morph and change shape, altering the tension, got the flexibility of spring. I feel like I want to just get blown up, put on my ice skate, and get my bike.
Then have to right together in a way that we call the initial questions, even though you probably couldn't make them. But in terms like you just and the kinds of beauty of the overlays happening in different complexity get recalled in these amazing moments. I think one of my favorite ones is this one right here, where this goes down and then bends back up. And so it becomes these sort of hidden geometries within geometries. If, if you had told me you were going to try to do this as a critic, I would tell you you were crazy because it's too hard. But you managed to do it. You managed to do it. So bravo. I would say that you don't need more.
I'm going to say you're somewhere in the world of religion, planter for religion. So this would be, at a large scale, create an arbor that those plants would thrive. You can take and grab and hold on.
Well, but you also would have to subject it to how much sunlight, how much water, the mosses grow under things, to how much, all those kinds of environmental conditions.
I actually thought that you could kind of go the direction that by doing that, we're obscuring the beauty of the structure and the
Well, that's true. It would, I think you have to subject it into another way of assessing it, like conditions and water conditions, to see what would happen with the volumes of the surfaces once things started to grow on them.
You don't have much time for research, but my idea was to maybe think how we have curves they're working, maybe like use some angle of the curve to create more narrow and more deeper, more depth, more shadowed areas.
You could put this into a simulation where you could test it in 50 degrees of space. And then to rediscover the surfaces, I think would be the way to go. But just to throw moss on it, it's too good for that.
I'm with Annette on that, right?
Yes.
Just to say that, I appreciate your answer. I think that definitely on the right spot. It's also clearly that that's the last step that you guys did at this moment. It's something you should carry along the rest.
Take the solids away, and you still feel as well about just the
I think it's a fantastic project, not just the mini pavilion that we're looking at or the installation, but also considering that in your first, 5 weeks here, have covered such a variety of fundamental aspects, from graphic to structural to morphological conditions, even including some fabrication ideas that are really just amazing. But what strikes me the most is the relationship between thick and thin. You're handling these little either printed or hand sculpted heavy models, and then you aerate them. You have to recreate the surfaces inside the model. The density of the
booleaned out or subtracted body needs a continued, really great relationship to the one aspect in terms of the structural potential of this piece could be to look into the tensile strengths of the carbon fiber strengths that you're using and maybe to activate those in the next step. And I'm not quite sure what the next part or phase of the studio. Because right now you're creating these ruled surfaces that are strictly line spaces that go span from one wire to another, when the process of forming and baking carbon fiber would allow you to probably engage into a larger set of formal movers.
I guess on the carbon fiber part, I mean, don't want to take anything away from all the amazing compliments you guys have, and I'm going to upload it as well. Like what you guys have made here is incredible. And I hope that my robotic students have seen your compliments. I hope they're here. But I want to say, I mean, it's interesting to me, like what I have in front of me, in the fact that like none of the, at least in this interpretation, right? Like none of the systems theoretically really works by itself. Like the carbon fiber would not work without the guide, and the guide would not work without the fiber either, at least in this configuration. One thing that is, I guess, really important about fiber, and clearly this model is not even taking into account, is that every time you have a cross, you have a strong point, right? And there is effectively no process here. They're all parallel lines, right? So that's why the fiber here is primarily working, I guess, intentionally if I'm compressing it, right? Because it's stopping it from coming apart. Again, this is really interesting. Another thing that I find really interesting in like this as an object and as an overall design is how much fleeting the overall massing form is. Like, let's call it a lava lamp, but not for any particular pejorative reason, other than to say that this as a form tries to express something that was momentarily there and it will disappear the next moment, right? But at the same time, the object itself, as an aesthetic condition, expresses exactly the opposite, right? Like that the carbon fiber is static, it's super strong, and it's not going to move, right? So there is that kind of duality in the massing as an interesting dialogue. Although, kind of going back to the moss, right? Like the moment the moss is introduced, there's a whole other narrative that comes into play. And then it's a bit of a missed opportunity with the, let's say, kind of to go back into the massing, but it's also interesting to introduce something that is alive in that duality between something that is fleeting and something that is static, homeoretic, kind of resisting its own presence versus something that would disappear in just a moment.
I was gonna comment about the mass, the overall mass as well. I mean, I totally agree. It's interesting to see this sort of amorphous shape, almost this kind of fluid blob on the inside, but then fade. And that's primarily where the carbon fiber is skinned along the surface, right? And you don't see it along the rectilinear edges where it hits the border of the chirotile. But I mean, another comment about the overall mass of this thing, I mean, I just really appreciate the way that you used it, the overall mass to test even the carbon fiber. I mean, you have this giant open space on the inside, you have relatively small touchdowns, you're creating a lot of different conditions with a few simple, not simple, but a few kind of Boolean kind of operations. And I think that is really rich just to see, you know, the span of it, right? It's obviously no problem to go across, you know, 4.5 feet. I also like that, you know, certain areas where those two surfaces are beginning to double up against one another. So you get a total variety of kind of visual density of that line work. I didn't know about the carbon fiber, that crossing it makes it stronger. So it's very interesting that you didn't do any of that. I mean, I quite appreciate that all of the lines are effectively parallel. All, you know, they're just continually wrapped in that way because you start to read the motion or the actual form a lot better. I think that if it was crisscrossed, it might have been stronger, but you might not see the form that you were working with from the beginning, which again, I think is quite nice, both from a standpoint of testing many different conditions, but also just generally aesthetically, it's quite interesting, and it produces all of those a diversity or a variety of situations where you have multiple layers ganging up on each other, and then certain areas where it becomes a lot less dense. So that that variety as you move around, I think is one of the most successful parts of the project. And I mean, I would echo the rest. I think the drawings are beautiful. It's nice to cite the drawing in an existing space as well, to give it a scale, to show the kind of the expanded version and all of that. So I think I would echo all of that. The conversation about the moss, I would probably tend to agree that I think you could do without it, only in that it is in this condition more applied rather than allowed to be kind of grown within the system. I think the idea is about the arboretum. I mean, obviously, if you had 3 months instead of 3 weeks to do a project, you could set this baby outside and just let all the weeds kind of grow up on top of it, and that would maybe produce more of the effect that you're looking for. So it's hard to replicate that in only a couple of days, but I like the idea to at least try and approach a combination between this and nature. Obviously, yeah, the time limits that you have maybe don't do it justice, but overall the project, yeah, certainly is fantastic.
Can you build on comment on the lines that don't cross each other? Because I think I was really struck the holding this little model and looking at that as a difference in terms of, you know, just the fact that it has so much more movement, right? And it has a directionality, and this is a beautiful little model. Yeah, and you can keep holding it.
Has anybody not
breaking.
seen this, by the way? 'Cause
Very cool. But I mean, it's really, you know, it's long. I mean, in a way, this already reads as like some of this can become a void, right? And it's almost like a graffiti capture of the embrace. So I almost feel like, you know, even though this was not necessarily the scale, I understand, but you almost feel like the body is already in there or something like that. But just a big difference to me is, you know, the expression of lines and how you chose to do it. There's a lot of directionality into it, and when I look at that beautiful space from there, it's really like, you know, something is forming through that, right? And I mean, you know, it's like water is moving through it, or body is there, right? So there's, you know, there's this dynamic to it that's really fantastic. And so I'm going to also criticize the moss just in the sense that it stops that movement. It's just laid on top, right, where everything is either like in tension, so we feel that the dynamic, or it has that directionality. So maybe it's not about getting rid of the moss altogether, but choosing like where it needs to go, where it can really like rest, like the end of the process, or it's like reinforcing something about the form. Right now, it's just kind of laid on top, and it disrupts that.
Sorry, to build on.
One simple comment that, you know, there's a lot of movement, it's concave, convex form, there's surprises, what's not improved. But what's happened is you've taken a very strong attitude towards the feeling, which is a kind of cubic form. And then fragmentation that occurs along the way because of its shape. But what do you think? Do you think that the movement of the curved form could influence? In other words, you have a very static idea about this against that. Do you think that for instance, the height of those might change? Is there a general idea of a flow with this? So that the basic cubic form would also participate in this kind of movie without losing the contour. But still, it seems like this is very seen as a structural problem, not an aesthetic. I knew that.
I think they've started to do something that addresses that in the drawings, as our comment on. Because I think you've made something a bit more of a cage in the drawing. You've tightened the spacing between the verticals. And what I like in the drawing and in the animation is that you get sort of two ghosts. You get the ghost of the container and you get the ghost of the optic inside. And I think at that moment you can sort of blur those sort of two things or make the spacers work them together like you're asking. I think it'll be a really successful project. Because I think it was a smart move in the drawings to tighten that sort of grid thing. Because here you're trying to make this thing go away. That's what he's picking up on. I think you're trying to, you don't want this, you want this. But what the drawings lead me to believe is you need both of them. And the thing inside of it gets stronger by a clear attitude towards the thing that it's containing.
Yeah, I'm thinking, where could this go? Where could this theme go? So there's two things that come to my mind. One is it could go more high tech. The other is that it could take more homage to the notion that you want to be trellis or something. So I'm trying to think, if you take the first approach, you start to think about light tubes that would actually be glowing, and you could actually really make this thing animate. The fiberglass can do that, probably gives the same job that the carbon fiber is doing right now. Just how do you take this wonderful idea and start to explore all of those variations? On the other side, could you do something with wood or wood fibers or educated wood fibers and start to create more of an organic thing that actually knit and work in the natural growth side of it? Yeah, I'm intrigued by it. And, I'd like to watch your notebooks in the next 2 years and see how this all goes.
I'll just go off of that maybe in a different way. The carbon fiber that you used specifically, everything that's here seems to be reading from the carbon fiber. So the way that we're talking about this, it's necessary because of the carbon fiber. Its contrast, its orthogonal nature gives more reading to the flow. And also, I know that because of the carbon fibers, it's aligned. It's creating these fluid surfaces that you can almost see what we call the grasshopper nature in here. That's because there's a really, really strong one. So while everyone was talking about the moss, I agree it's not there yet, but it seems like a challenge that that third material is a really good direction that you can hypothetically take this, because two materials are already necessitated for this to happen, and the carbon fiber, it can't exist by itself. And so you're already talking about in a way, heterogeneous system here. And so adding another material and then going back and reevaluating the model digitally, seeing what types of services are good for growing moss, doing research in that. If you wanted to go down that route, that could be a really, really rich way to add another material to this. My reading of it is that moss is not there yet. I think we all agree that it's not there. It's a captivating start. You might be able to.
And what's really great about the moss, aside from how is the kind of difference in opacity that it produces. I think a lot of times you're relying on the layering of material three-dimensionally, but I would wonder, I think there's a hint of like if another material is woven with it, how you can produce kind of opacity in a thinner plate, right? Not just in the build of things three-dimensionally. Like, I think this is an amazing model of almost like a patchwork pattern that builds up on itself. And so if you're playing that, not only three-dimensionally as you're moving through the various layers of the model itself, but also maybe a kind of thinner plane of how you can impact that, how you can produce different levels of opacity, just in the surface of the carbon fiber itself, or introducing a different directionality of weaving. That could be, quite amazing, because I think the overall form we're getting to the way that the carbon fiber snakes through three-dimensional, but maybe there are ways that you can play with that different forms and figures begin to emerge and re-emphasize how you can use that other directionality, how might be able to impact that.
I would suggest that, the moss is such a wildly different element. Because I think as architects, we think of it as green and soft, right? And quote natural. But it's a very highly technical undertaking to really begin to do something interesting in natural material. Because there are so many different parameters. If you want to look at an illustration, look at Mary Oxman's silkworm project at MIT, where they generated the patterns that a silkworm would take in computational space, understanding how silkworms weave material. Now imagine how technical that was to understand how the silkworms were going to travel by observation, and then modeling it computationally so that it was not just a sphere, the sphere was broken into ways that they would move, and then a kind of material aesthetic that came out of all of the things altogether. So it's not for the faint of heart, right? I think we architects like to put little trees in their models and little green lawns, but it is, to really handle it well, you have to become just as sophisticated as you are, if not more so, than a carbon fiber. If you want it to be not just a kind of applied material, but to have to grow with the model.
Yeah, I think for all the very helpful feedback. So I think I'm gonna talk a little bit about the mouse. So like the mouse, there's a lot of improvement for the mouse, of course. But I mean, for here, I think we introduced while we are doing the carbon fiber, we also found there's a lot of new possibilities with carbon fiber. So as we look for a lot of the precedent, like they're all doing like the like regular straight line something, but while we're exploring with this, like we found a carbon fiber can actually do a curvature to do something more than like just a grade or something. So so right now maybe the mouse is just like a representation or more for narrative use.
It's a little kind of symbol.
Yeah. Yeah, I think for future, hopefully, like we can keep researching like carbon fiber. Like we want to see like the vegetation can actually grow along, like can like along.
Maybe for next semester, you can take that little model, maybe make it for the linear one, put it in a little plate of moss and see what happens.
Yeah.
Well, let's see. Just like one more sentence for you guys. I mean, what is primary here is not carbon. We could even arguably say fiber, but even the fiber might not be the most important thing here. In that, I think the intertwining of logic and the weaving that you do, at least in the first two materials, and the way that you think through the materials as a tectonic, it is in a sense what is primary. And what the moss doesn't do is that it doesn't play that game. Yes, right. You could have replaced this thing. You guys had access to carbon fiber. This could have been any fiber whatsoever. And it's also the resin could have been any resin whatsoever. And even materially, these things have the ability to exchange information. And even the resin could be providing nutrients for all of its purposes and so on and so on. Let alone this thing is conductive. So like electricity and temperature, well, let's say energy goes through this thing, right? So you can even control where the moss grows.
Now we're talking. We'll say thank you to him.
Philadelphia, it's not hard to grow moss. So easy. But no, none of us have talked about the cleverness of the mylar. I think it'd be very different if it weren't there.
Although Danielle's wearing the wrong coat.
Maybe you should also point at its amazing animation.
Oh my.
Maybe I'll talk as you guys are watching. I must say to this, I think we got incredible feedback, not only about what you do, but the future of this project. And not only for the studio, but also for even extra. And the thing that I think you guys should think about as well is you played an interesting game between exterior, exterior, and this like third state. And I think that can be equally explored about public space and agency, not only of the greater public who interacts with it, but also the agency of organic and live material or agents. And I really hope you take all these comments and feedback and keep exploring it, in architecture, not just in the chamber project. If we want to make it so the insane research that you did today, so many levels, I think, and that's something at the beginning, like, if I saw this, this would have been crazy for you to make it, right? I also had the same thought at the beginning when you guys proposed this, and I want to applaud you on the level of commitment this really interesting dialogue between doing things digitally, plotting them out, doing things with your hands, coming up with techniques, very professional techniques of weaving, that, you know, when I look at this, I might not, especially the weaving, know that it was done with my hands. So you did this incredible thing with this chamber. So I just want to applaud, thank you guys. It's awesome work, and to those that are tuning in, thank you so much for this. I don't know if there's any other comments, but congratulations, really amazing work. All right, so I think we're at the point where we're gonna shift downstairs, and we'll start with Brian's project. Thanks, Jen. It went great. No,
Beautiful thing you guys have here.
Yeah.
What's happening like this thing? No, of course.
You just have to link.
Take it apart. It's gonna be.
I volunteer, I will take it.
Well, yeah.
Yeah.
On that one.
Everyone is looking more.
Yeah, I don't know.
I'm guessing that they're gonna let it sit here for because they are.
Yeah.
And then 이렇게 때 take it outside. Yeah. Some comments like good.
Yeah.
Wait till the monster show that. That's what I'm
the box.
So it's live stream?
Yeah.
Why they're going to have it? Oh, that's fine. I don't know.
Yeah.
Very funny.
go to here or back here.
Just introduce briefly, she just joined us, la tengo organizada good school,
both degree in architecture and landscape architecture. And she was, and what you see, you're going to change, so station looking for education justice. She also teaches with the 611 course within this architecture. Social movements of social justice.
And also, everyone just joined us. He's the teacher and educator, but also now he's the year. So we have both views on. So we'll begin with a short introduction. So we work on creating environmental objects that would be a manifestation of grace. So to generate this strange entity, we looked at organisms that behave in a parasitic / invasive ways. In the sense that they want to spread, they want to populate, they want to take over and into its surroundings.
So this object right here, and it's currently so although some of the properties there similarities to of the Toya factory store, and very similar that we started with. Also, you can see our here, we've got like a triple kind of like rotating shells, kind of serving with the base, where you can see direct. And also the inspiration from floral file, where like the floral releases sorted out, and spread out, and on the surface, you can grow. Kind of see our model. There's a small little spore, a single island over there. Where it's starting to and so basically the cycle just continues from there, expanding, growing, spreading.
So now I'm going to talk more specifically about our images and our representation. So with the representations, we wanted to create two images from different types of perspectives. So we have this one and the one in that corner. With this one, we wanted to create an image where the fawn is perceived in its like natural state, in its natural environment. So it looks quite benign, very at peace. And then when we look over at that one, we kind of see it from the point of view here on Earth, where it is invasive, obviously it's very scary. And which brings me to talk about the contrast between the physical model and the digital representation. So the visual representation is quite similar, whereas in our physical model, we wanted to do a chunk where the beginnings of the road were like was demonstrated. So the chunk kind of demonstrates the beginning of the road, the potential that the same now
Yeah. I think that's the integrated model. There are 4 case files for our digital data. The first one is hiding the R in the basement. And just as you can see from this model, the first we can R and base. And then we tie R and rows to the certain point
And then the second step, also the most important step, is to create the model gel. As you can see, we use the different framework and our device to define this model. We build it from the top to down rather than the traditional way, like from the bottom to the top. So it's totally different. And as you can see from this mesh, we doesn't just cover the mesh on our framework. We take our mesh and we overlay them and we rotate somewhere. So you can say there also are some big voids and in different shapes. And when you go from the top wheel, you can get all the shapes emerge from the bottom. So it creates a sense of growing and energy of life. But if you say from the bottom wheel from this direction, you just maybe falling down, and the next void tend to pull you into it. And then the third step is to put the glue on to validate this model. So it is the low gas part. And the last step is just to reverse follow totally different directions. Then you find it. And as for our you see on the pressure, we the total pressure.
Yeah. So my part is basically to export what is maybe happening in the view based on our market ideas. So we export so many living techniques have low extraordinary numbers. And we finally choose 3 from them. So the first one and second one, yeah. The first, yes, our fifth. So the first one and second one is about the primary and secondary peaks. So the inspiration is from the case that all the natural features are start from. So the DNA and RNA. So you can imagine. So the DNA is for the primary peak, and the RNA is from the secondary peak. And for the yes, we abstract them as double helix rope and the single helix rope. So with something mysterious power and the string of them this form are superpower even without fluid. Okay, so the third technique is on the match. So the inspiration is from the back of crocodile skeleton you can see on that wall. Yeah, and this diamond shaped web is flexible and can change your size based on the anchor point. And after we glue it, it becomes super strong and the shape becomes super cool. And this web becomes the most important structure that holds our whole chamber and to avoid
you want to mention space. So as far as like spatial configuration, I think the physical model is what we were more looking at for that, rather than the digital representation. So we have like close-up shots in the QR code on our website, like inside the model, and basically we just wanted to create like a feeling of what it would be like to get into private space, because that's what it does. That's what it would do eventually here. So I think with that rendering, it kind of captures that feeling a little bit. We have the score maybe very.
And I think spatially it's really very interesting. I think the moving the camera away from just being more shell, I think you guys have all that overlap where these step into each other and through each other, and so you start to get these pockets of space and stuff, not just kind of space under it or kind of like cleanly bifurcating between it. Like it's really tangled up. Like you start to take sections of this, you get these spaces of very different scales, which seems really, you know, one charge for architecture, but also like opportunity for the next step as you guys extract from these and how you start to move in other scales that involve in habitation. You know, so this you can scale this so many different ways, but you would get very different things because it wouldn't just be this one shell. You know, so I find that really exciting, just the decision to start letting strands overlap or slide through each other, and then just all of that space across. I mean, I think there's also decisions like letting some of these smaller strands not connect to the overall. So you get that as like another mediator. I think even thinking of your crown, it's not one controlled shape, and this thing that starts to come right. I think there's a high degree of differentiation in it, which seems exciting to me versus like it being so ruled. You know, like even moving to, you know, from like the kind of control of where you start, and then as you start to, like what we'll see today, as you start to material and all these other properties, right? But then I think even the representation, you're saying it's not quite matched up yet. I mean, I think you're trying to capture it. Like these are no longer like super clean, they're not a cylinder, they're not a circle, it's not like a clean arch. Like you're already trying to think about this thing, this engulfing itself, and overlapping and tangled. So yeah, I mean, I think like you're kind of highlighting the spatial. I think that's really, really well done. I mean, my one other comment would be I love seeing color and thinking about how it does something again, like we were talking about the last one outside, adding to it. It's not just like a coloration, but it's this finish that changes the form. But the one thing I'd just be curious is if you could go even more at some of these images where you're really starting to like splatter, jump across. Like it's not a clean gradient, which this is. You know, this is something more than just coating it, and it's more exciting than just like the main structure gets one color or the secondary gets another. But I wonder if you could go further as you move into your next phase. Like the things you're doing here are quite interesting. They're not the way we normally code elements in architecture. And so I think you could kind of keep exploring that. Like even this kind of great, you know, there's a whole number of kind of finishes coming on here. Nice job. Why didn't you get that machine? They forgot to wear them. I promise you they would. I've done that. We need to do a conversation about color. It almost seems to me that color is kind of close to the finish right after that. So precisely because this is kind of looks like small process relied on gravity and intelligent material to be able to use the liquidity color as a way to start growing. Like literally get this in paint and that paint will start to reduce the influence by gravity while simultaneously that allows the form to start to kind of establish this conversation between color, but also and form that. The thing I was curious about is that the idea of this interface that the guys mentioned in your presentation. I'm curious how the interface is defined because your curve updates to a singular surface. Entirely universal as horizontal, it's always aligned. So I'm curious, like, when that interface starts to shuffle, change, or start to become inside part of the inside of the structure. So what kind of form that you use kind of sort of spaces that are meshed because of that. So, and then the third thing I think is also quite interesting to me, you know, how this particular net structure is implied. I see that there is two kind of systems. One is being these two hooks being open to each other, right? But then there's also another layer. This process
within those schools, that's actually more knowledge. But so I'm curious if there is that there can be another degree of differentiation of these two systems, which may potentially create a new kind of homogeneous dynamics going on.
When you mentioned about the that turning into the model, I think it was beginning to be explored in the digital representation that it goes beyond the ground plane and reaches underground and beneath. But yeah, I think it would be interesting to explore that for the
It's very subtle. It's just one layer. But there's the name base, and then also the separate layers on top of it.
often the roles of the environment. Why don't you these assemblies take actors in a space file? Here you see what would happen, right? When you suddenly become many actors, like a constellation of actors, how much more playful and intricate right now, yes. Also disorganized. It goes very much to the organic itself. How it then is. One thing that I love about this project, subjective now, is how they found this way of one mesh is reveals people across, how they could design so many lenses, right? How it opens up in the top of the wall, how it grabs and creates people out of it, how we can make a wall. So the intelligence of this mesh, I think, is a great story. Along with that, there's, I'm also cool, but there's moments where the message will never end. Hiding the fan. So it's like not only bubbling up, but it's also doing that thing for me. And I think that the technique of the road and the message is pretty good with that. And I like the textual features like the expansion and started with the DNA I also would get interested for the waiting. That's great. Okay. So it was very intentional when we spray painted it. It took like a few layers, a long time to get right. So we were really trying to, like you said, bring in the edges for like certain parts of it, bring it lower than others, just to create that effect that is always looking for something to spawn to. See it for every side. And make it as like dynamic as possible. It's a very different experience to look at it from inside.
We have a previous project talking about any of the ideas that could have a continuity next week. I think this narrative that we use, the growth, development, and so on, is I think it's a really great seed of a project that can help you think about the interventions as a growth of architecture, that includes different types of social processes and that might be mediated by an architecture that also is capable of transforming, of adapting,
various processes. So that part of the narrative, I think, could be an interesting way of also adding a lens to interpret the project, to interpret the various aspects of it. There will be moments where it softens and serves a certain purpose. It's difficult, but sometimes very hardens, the relationship between the intention and compression and the activation of one or the other, depending on what you want the space to do, can be a really exciting line of work.
These other projects, these sorts of things, how to generate anything sort of possible, right? You do generate that out of intentional place, but yeah, and also present actually, I'm sure something without something like
So could be predominantly could be predominantly maybe the percentage of the horizontal meaning you have to deal with. That comes with the purpose of this.
You're saying that it's maybe theater, almost, and we will what and we start talking after a week of mental match, we start to come up. Close of the building, close of the part of the energy, that's something we see in the recovery, fiber. We said we think you have fun, and I think you learn many skills.
Thank you. I want to really
Okay. Okay. You guys are welcome to see the back.
Is this
Yeah.
happening?
Yeah, I think so. All right, so like our other three groups, if we've already seen, we're really interested in the different forms of institutional critique. And our group was particularly interested in our institutions and museums, and the idea of critiquing how art has become commodified in the art industry. And we, in our pavilion, we are going to perform an auction to kind of demonstrate and shed light on the issues and impacts of the commodification and the effects of capitalism on the art industry.
So today we are opting for four different objects from four different talented artists. So like all of these four would be very of great value.
Let's start
start with the option by with the first piece of art, which is a film and conduct. This is artwork. This is inspired by the sexual misconduct and harassment by the authoritative figure in the art institutions to the between the authoritative figure in the art institution and their workers. And this is a really paradoxical piece because this sort of event of sexual harassment doesn't really happen rarely. Like it happens a lot of times, but those authoritative figures seldom got appointed or like punished because of this sort of event. So this art has the meaning of paradoxical. And we'll start meeting by at a price of $200,000. Anybody wants to play? What's your price?
Oh, starting there?
Yeah, starting at $200,000.
Do you have any competitors?
Competitors?
500,000.
Whoa.
$600,000.
$600,000? $600,000 once, twice, per. Okay, that goes to, that goes to company. And we promise none of this income that we got from this auction is going to the people, the victim that is suffering from this like event, and we're not donating it to any of the charity groups.
So the second piece. So this one's dedicated to the columns and the entropy workers. So this is a remarkable piece that has been survived among the ongoing pandemic. And a piece that has been kept, maintained, and protected away from the general public. And in the upper hands of the trustees and the board of members, and it's kept in the New York penthouse. We also would like to thank all the employees in the union that have lost their job and that they've lost their job and they're still like underpaid. That kept this. And it's the bidding starts at 30,000.
40,000.
40.
100.
100. 150. Okay.
200.
200.
105.
That's a lot. Anymore?
Going twice.
Okay.
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 All right, so the third object we'll be showing is representative of the toxic philanthropy that often occurs in institutions. So this object was lent to the museum by one of our wealthy benefactors. This is a rare and valuable object. Oftentimes, these donations by wealthy art collectors are seen as generous donations, but in reality, they gain value and exposure during their time in museums, making it a more valuable asset for these donors, and also it's as a way of getting out of taxes. So use as a loophole. So we will start bidding for this object at $100,000. Cheyenne, anybody else?
300,000.
300,000. 500,000. 550.
700,000.
Oh, 700,000. Going once. Going twice. Oh.
900,000.
All right. Going once. Going twice. Sold. Yeah.
And here is
This is from one and only Jeff, who's a very famous artist, and this object is titled as Art as Luxury. It kind of represents the idea that art is stratification by the art market in art is stratified by the wealth, and capitalism has kind of ruined the arts through capitalize it and demeaning its true value of cultural and emotional factors that kind of resonate people with it. So to ensure that a person of good value, high value to get it, this object will start at the price at 300,000. So you really have any bidder here.
300.
300.
I'm after you.
Any other? 300,000 going once, 300,000 going twice. So.
So that concludes our auction. Don't forget to take your picture. If you see the back, we have our corporate sponsors who help make this auction possible and help fuel the institutions with their great generosity. We want to build this capitalist modernity with all your money, and we'll keep doing this until our sponsors pocket is full.
As I mentioned earlier, the floor is also open for anybody here. Of course, our critics, our esteemed critics too. Everybody else. I think the metaphor transfers over to the material and the performance perfectly, because when you think about it, the metaphor is really talking about stripping away layers of like a surface level understanding of art, museums as an institution, and then that translates over to the layers that we see in the model, and then the performance side really ripping away the layers and auctioning them off. So I thought that was genius, very well executed. Of course, the authors of the project can also respond, and I should stop.
I want some like explanation of the materials, like what Diego just started talking about, like, you know, we have this kind of like structure, and there was like a very kind of like violent, way of touching objects, which I think is the best part, sound. But how do you come up with that? How do you know?
I think when we started with this idea, we started with the idea of the commodification of art and digging into that. So then the idea of the auction house kind of came into play, and that's when we started to think of the form that we wanted to use. So we wanted the form to be almost like we've been setting a shell-like form, something that kind of encases you and kind of engulfs you and brings you in. So then we have this shell with these different branching arms that are supposed to kind of almost bring you in, and you have the kind of, we're talking about the Trojan horse, decorating that. So we kind of have on the back of that shell these the logos and companies that
out to these institutions. So it looks all nice to be on the outside. I think that's what the benefit for what's going on, and so on the inside, is see what's really the deeper meaning behind them that are fueled by the shadow panel. So trying to, with the form, try to create the best way of trying to demonstrate that those are the facets. And I guess as we're going from container projects, intending to create a clean exterior.
Were these parts, like, supposed to be part of the structure, or were they intentionally, or were they? Yeah.
The grade that was in this piece, hopefully we are part of this organization. Part of the whole. Or like 3% of it. But that was. You just don't have on human be. You know what option, right? Yeah, it's a cage. Oh, there's no extension. It's completed just in one stage.
Yeah, there's the render over there.
Yeah, they saw the website that you could do that.
Yeah. Okay. And we're imagining the tubes and the arms can extend it out, come in CD or the open house, inviting more people to join, public.
That's one thing, but you run out of.
Wow, we kind of like it.
Yeah.
It's great, great to touch. Yeah, just like telling you there's the this.
And this is the last one. All the information that we run from.
And there's like articles about art institutions and all the art pieces, art pieces being talked about, and events that happens in the institutions.
So like that came after the previous project, you know, like parasite. You know, in this, it's kind of unclear what is a parasite and what is the parasite is on. You know, are these you know, veins, are they growing on the structure engulfing those, you know, it almost looks like the aftermath of like being fed on, you know, which has like a very particular kind of posture. And I think that there's something also really like the way like the horizontal feeling of how it reaches front, it has like the similar qualities of like exponential growth or like the organic kind of coming out. The mesh is really interesting too. Like, does the mesh come before the plaster, or is the plaster housing the mesh? You know, it's like almost like a few different organisms living in one.
Almost really like our process of making too. We decided that along with the making process, so we see how it grows.
Yeah.
Let it like as a leftover shell, you know, like what it happens after the fact.
Appreciate the aspect of the spectacle of museums, not necessarily going for, you know, appreciation of what is being displayed, but the scene, like the object of, you know, observations, both the aspect of, you know, photo op sponsors could also be taking part in consuming of art, you know, not necessarily because of
social cloud for aspects of that. In that way, it sort of hollows out a lot of the message that an art, like art piece or an art installation has. Bastardizes the intent. It was like social critique, but then fed into this engine of high art consumerism, which is only accessible to extremely rich people.
How the whole discussion revolves around questions of meaning, representation, and symbolism. And I wonder whether that is the success of this particular project, or the fact that this is the third project in the sequence that we see, right? So by now, we know what to talk about in relationship to these proposals, right? So either way, it's a form of success, one or the other. And I thought that the first comment made by you was actually very, very good in terms of how very explicitly extreme way of these things actually does represent what's supposed to be the purpose of the criticism embodied in the work. And maybe another parallel of that would be to say that there's an interesting condition whereby over here the artifact looks sort of more and more rich, right? But actually, when you walk around, it starts to become more and more embodied, right? So the reading is more one of a series of discrete elements. So in a way, that's also a metaphor of the same thing, in that we tend to visualize these institutions as a single brand or a museum or a thing, something that has a clear identity, but actually once you start reading more and more layers into it, the whole thing becomes much more complicated, much more enticing number of different elements. But I think on that level, it's also
Like that, I think the point about it being a monolith, it resembling like a solid form from this side, and also granted the idea of it being like, like in the value system, like it passes itself off as a guide of like, oh, philanthropy, maybe that's this side. But then when you walk around, you realize that all of those, those claims are hollow.
yeah, I had like not house, right?
I appreciate the fact that the third project, it's been like you said, a break. We're talking about ducks, integrated sheds, and Trojan ducks, or Trojan integrated ducks. Anyway, just a hype.
We're not trained for this. We need some targets too.
Right.
Yeah, like in a, like say something. Great is we planted a sequence so that there's a reception front and the way party side. I appreciate the like thoughtfulness of the performance and not just like looking at the that would be creative, but then you're also creative about the ethical comment. I think this could go two ways. So like what you did was you break off these veins and you offer the criticism, criticism of what's happening. But the thing that I'm now wondering is like, what would you do to break off all of them? And would that be like there's a way in which you can consume this and like continue to consume art and further your criticism, but there's also a way in which you could destroy the art and how
Except for ripping off entire arms to kind of that, that progression. Kind of reconstructing.
Eventually bring a sledgehammer, start taking fragments and selling them.
reconstruct itself. It doesn't thing. That's the problem. You just let go back, keep on the road.
It's cool to think of like what was the life before the auction house, what's the life after the auction house, like whether because you can imagine the same like structure, like really happy and really solid, and then when things start to break down, it becomes something else, and, and then it can keep morphing. And a bit of like
like the sad stories of like Olympic buildings, they're like so beautiful, and then there's a few years later they degrade into something really different. Yeah, it's interesting to think about that. All the different lives of it. All the way through.
Yeah. We have some structural.
No, that's very important. That's also about. One thing that's also quite interesting is how you're thinking if you're using auction as a means to perform a institutional critique, which seems to suggest that you are trying to exhaust that as a way to criticize the very political nature of the museums of the institution. So I guess I'm curious to see how that the act of like exhaustion, form of space making, is manifested perhaps in the later sequence. How is it materialized, formalized? How does it evolve and invite participation? I guess the question of like the audience is super important, right? Like, who is your intended audience? Like, who are the people holding the sign? How does that mesh with kind of both the onshore and offshore of institutional that revealing the production of object.
We are critiquing the art institution movement. Don't know much about the next project, but it's going to be the art institution. So I think that could be a really interesting segue, and definitely it could be a stepping stone into creating and engaging and continuing to shed light on the issues that we're discussing here.
Thank you for basically the structure is supposed to be a museum or museum attention. And basically you're talking to the industrial client. And you have to criticize the client to avoid that information to you. So, yeah.
So there are many ways that you could take, but maybe your client has changed. Maybe the way that the institution is constituted after the PMA, after a new system of governance is implemented, after a different cooperative structure is established, and the former criminal one is rendered obsolete. We start reimagining the institution in completely new ways. Maybe the ways. So it offers, so the exhaustion of the institution and the auction as an institution of capitalism in the art market, and as a symbol of it, I think plays that role very well. So I really appreciate your point and the conversation that we're having, because it's really now pointing at the core of the discussion in the studio. But I don't want to interrupt it either. I don't want this to sound like a close.
But I think
We have to close it. So I can wrap up. I'll take the opportunity to wrap up. So to continue that line of thought, I really appreciate that by the third project we entered. And on the second one we were almost there. On the third one we are all full in. And also the dynamic that was created by the performative act, a very bold performative act,
triggered a completely a complete reconfiguration of the review dynamic. We're no longer in that abstract hierarchical relation that we usually are, and that we are so awkward in when the conditions are represented, no? are presented like again but differently, and where we are all openly speaking to one another from various perspectives in a very comfortable but still awkward because it's still a review. No, but that awkwardness is very telling of the institution that we're in also, no? Which is another modern institution. And similarly violent as the one that we're critiquing. So I really appreciate that we have reached this point at the end of this review. It's an effort that's collective, you know, that because this is a discourse that is built from the first project until the last one. And it's in the last one where we're all in that, you know, in that other space, other atmosphere, and that other conversation that's at the center of what our studio is trying to research. So thank you, the students, for doing that.
Yeah, you'll do good, Greg.
Now maybe we can meet. I don't know. Any other thoughts, questions before?
Where did you want to?
So let's meet with my group briefly. Nothing that's private or secret, but just wanted to first.
Oh wait, you bought it. I didn't buy it.
So we're going down. But shall we have? What do you think about having? Music standard.
Oh yeah.
Thank you for the. I would say.
Okay, so you I'm really cold. Yeah. Oh, yeah, it's like. Maybe more. Yeah, maybe you guys do maybe want to walk together. Maybe.
Yeah.
Mẹ ngôi trường nè con chưa mai mai chị mai